When we picture the Cold War, the story is usually a simple staring contest across the Iron Curtain. Washington on one side, Moscow on the other, both aiming thousands of nuclear warheads at each other's capitals. In that binary worldview, the tiny island of Cuba appeared to be a sidekick, a crumbling, economically broken Soviet satellite parked just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, existing mostly to take orders from the Kremlin. But while American intelligence was obsessively watching Moscow, Havana was running an independent shadow war against the United States. In the early 1970s, the U.S. experienced a massive wave of domestic terrorism, seeing roughly 5 bombings a day at its peak. Cuban intelligence provided the support, training, and arms for many of the domestic militant groups carrying out those attacks. At the same time, Cuban agents were breaching the highest levels of the U.S. national security apparatus. From the State Department to the Pentagon, Havana established intelligence penetrations that remained active for decades. This creates a central paradox. How does an isolated, impoverished island manage to bypass the defenses of a global superpower and successfully rot its institutions from the inside out? Soviet communism was often seen as dense and bureaucratic, focused on the dry economic theories of the industrial worker. Havana abandoned that model, crafting a romanticized, militant doctrine centered on the Third World. At the 1966 Tricontinental Conference, Havana gathered delegates from 82 countries to coordinate a planet-wide offensive. They sidelined traditional talk of class warfare, centering the revolution instead on race and the legacy of colonialism. By doing so, they framed Western civilization itself as the primary antagonist of history. This framing allowed Cuban intelligence to recruit American radicals. By casting the United States as an imperial oppressor, they convinced domestic activist groups that they shared a common identity with revolutionary guerrillas in Africa and Asia. Havana knew they could never match the U.S. military tank for tank. Instead of fielding a conventional army, they began mass-producing insurgents, setting up training camps on the island to teach urban warfare and explosives manufacturing to foreign recruits. They established a global supply chain for terrorism. Cuba trained the founders of Colombia's ELN and poured what U.S. intelligence described as an incredible amount of weapons into Nicaragua to ensure the victory of the Sandinista rebels. In Venezuela, the strategy shifted from jungle warfare to state capture. Cuba sent tens of thousands of doctors, teachers, and intelligence advisors to embed within the country. These agents built massive social patronage networks, while advisors purged the military of dissent, effectively transforming an oil-rich power into a strategic outpost for Havana. Cuba's geopolitical power came from this capability. They demonstrated that a small nation could manufacture and export ideological proxy wars across an entire hemisphere. This ideological warfare provided the perfect cover for deep cover espionage. While Soviet intelligence agencies like the KGB usually recruited assets by offering large payouts or using blackmail, Cuba's Directorate of Intelligence used a different method. The DI cultivated true believers. While a transactional spy exchanges documents for cash, creating a visible financial trail for investigators to follow, an ideological spy steals secrets out of political devotion. This leaves no financial trail for counterintelligence to track. In 1984, the DI recruited Ana Montes while she was a graduate student. She spent 17 years climbing the ranks of the Defense Intelligence Agency, eventually becoming the U.S. government's top analyst on Cuba. Montes handed over the identities of American undercover agents and revealed the locations of secret military bases. She even helped draft official reports for Congress that minimized the threat the Castro regime posed to the United States. Similarly, Cuban intelligence recruited Victor Manuel Rocha at an elite university in the 1970s. His handlers instructed him to build a fiercely conservative, right-wing persona to camouflage his true loyalties. The cover allowed Rocha to join the State Department and eventually become the U.S. ambassador to Bolivia. He operated as a mole for Havana for 50 years before his arrest in 2023. By relying on ideological zeal, the DIA achieved what the Soviet KGB could not: decades of institutional penetration that was nearly impossible for traditional counterintelligence to detect. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, historical assumptions suggested that the global communist threat had died with it. But because the Cuban Empire was built on human networks rather than Soviet tanks, its subversive infrastructure survived the Cold War. Today, that system continues to function. Secrets collected by assets inside the U.S. are funneled to Havana and then shared with modern geopolitical adversaries in Beijing, Moscow, and Tehran. The legacy of the Cuban Revolution shows that a superpower's greatest vulnerability isn't its military perimeter. By turning a nation's own citizens and institutions into tools of subversion, Havana has successfully maintained an asymmetrical war for over 60 years.